Well, welcome to the first Friday of 2021. And the purpose of these sessions is to support people in the workplace, and especially HR professionals who have a challenging time at the best of times. And I offer these sessions free of charge because I have a positive impact philosophy and I believe in being the change I want to see, and feel that if we all did a bit positively and constructively, things would change for the better. Today's session is particularly relevant to our times. And I was having a discussion with Lisa just about how it's so tempting in these times to crisis times. I've seen so many posts on some groups about the challenges on LinkedIn and Facebook groups about the challenges that HR professionals are finding at the moment. Homeschooling, still work happening, and of course all the legislation and all the workplace issues that are happening. So it is really, really tempting to just carry on working, keep going, and not take time out to recharge, learn some skills, some knowledge that can help in these challenging times. So it's even more important to practice self-care, and this is the focus of today's session. We discussed whether we ran the session because we knew numbers would be low because obviously the crisis times we're in. However, because of the topic of the session, we felt it was so important that we did run the session. So I know it's going to be useful, certainly for me, and hopefully for everybody attending. I'm delighted to introduce a guest speaker, Lisa Robinson of Citrus Consulting, and I've known her for some time. She is a consummate professional. In my dealings with her, I'm always impressed at her commitment to her work, and she's particularly passionate about the topic she's talking about. So I'm going to shortly ask Lisa to take the stage, so to speak. However, just to let you know, the session is designed to be very interactive, so please put questions in the chat. It's aimed at small numbers so that we can really tailor the sessions and you can raise the issues you have. So any questions, please put in the chat, or Lisa's very happy to take questions as we go along in the session. So without further ado, welcome Lisa.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for inviting me to take part in your first Friday series, which is, they're a fantastic series, and I'm I feel very privileged to be here to present. Yeah, and I think when we, I look back and when we talked about running this session, and I think little did we know that we'd be running it on a week when probably, stress levels are at the highest that they've been for a long time. And I think generally stress levels have been high for quite some time. But I think this week in particular is particularly relevant, as you say. So yeah, I'm Lisa Robinson. I run a HR consultancy called Citrus Consulting, and I also run a female-focused coaching, sort of well-being, stress and overwhelm focused coaching business called The Extraordinary Female. And I became particularly interested in sort of well-being, stress management after sort of a few years ago when I had sort of some significant life events happen to me, and dealing with those whilst I'm a working mum. I've got three boys, all of school age, and juggling those things plus running a business. And so being under sustained stress for quite some time, and really seeing the impact that had on me. And that really led me to want to, really understand about stress, what, how the impact it has, how you can manage it, and help others to, to deal with stress and overwhelm in their lives, because there's a lot of it. So that's where my interest came from, and that's where the sort of the extension to my HR business, which is the Extraordinary Female, came from. I think, if we look at the last 9 months, the environment has been so stressful. It's been challenging to a greater or lesser degree for most people. And I think particularly for HR professionals who are supporting organisations, who are dealing with changes in legislation and changes that, we had the coronavirus job protection scheme launched, and then various iterations of that have come through. Very often the iterations would come through on a Friday night, just as you're closing down for the day. And I think we've given as a profession a lot to our teams and to organisations, which is absolutely right. But you then reflect back on who's there to support the HR team and HR professionals. So hopefully this session will build some background in terms of stress and its impact, because it is significant, and what we can do to help manage that. So okay, so let's just have a look at what stress is. So stress isn't always bad. Stress can help us to perform and help us to get real focus to achieve tasks and deadlines. But when we're under stress, the first thing that happens to our bodies is so we have something called the sympathetic nervous system, and when we're under stress, that's activated. And that is also, so the sympathetic nervous system is also known as our fight or flight response. Now, fight or flight is designed to get us out of danger, which is great. And when we're in danger, that's obviously very, very helpful. The problem is that our bodies don't know the difference between when we're in, that sort of life or death dangerous situation, and let's say when we are angry or really frustrated at something, such as let's say an argument in the workplace. So what happens is that our body triggers that fight or flight response under any sort of stress. So when stress is triggered, our adrenal glands start to flood our body with hormones, so adrenaline, cortisol, and these hormones have a particular purpose. So they really raise our levels of alertness, they increase our heart rate, they send extra blood to our muscles, which is obviously intended that if we need to run from a danger, that we have the energy to do that. Our breathing speeds up, so our brain gets more oxygen. The cortisol puts glucose into our bloodstream, so that that elevates our blood sugar. So that gives us a boost of energy. At the same time as that, these hormones, sort of within that sympathetic nervous system, actually slow down some of the other bodily functions that we don't need when we are in that sort of fight or flight situation. So, for example, it will slow down our digestion. So the sympathetic, just move on to the sympathetic nervous system, that is enabling us to make very quick judgments about things, which again, as I say, in situations of danger, that's what we need. But we don't need that when we're dealing with just sort of everyday, maybe significant, but everyday stress situations. We don't necessarily need that real sort of responsiveness that the fight or flight mechanism gives us, because our body still reacts in the same way. And what then happens is that our bodies are operating at sort of quite a high level of activity, that our body is really sort of hyperactive almost to deal with something that actually we don't need that level of alertness and all the other functions that happen just to deal with the sort of the day-to-day stress. So once that stressful situation has passed, let's say you've dealt with a particular task, or a stressful phone call, let's say, that sympathetic nervous system won't just switch off. So the adrenaline and the cortisol is still pumping in your body. But what then happens is that your body has a balancing system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that works to calm your body down. So it will bring down your breathing, bring down your blood pressure, and try and bring those hormones back down to normal. The parasympathetic nervous system is also known as the rest and digest system. So some of the bodily functions that are stopped while we're in fight or flight, such as digestion, will be allowed to then start to happen. So the parasympathetic nervous system that's made up of a number of nerves that run from our brain all the way through our body, connecting all of our organs. The largest nerve in that parasympathetic nervous system is called the vagus nerve, and that makes up about 75% of the parasympathetic nervous system. And we're going to, I'm saying this because we're going to refer to that a little bit later on. So these two systems, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, they work in balance all the time, trying to just keep our body on an even keel. Now, if we're dealing with a sort of a situational, stressful situation, fight or flight kicks in. Once the situation's over with, parasympathetic kicks in, and we return to some balance. But the problem with the environment that we live in, certainly at the moment, but also, I think just generally, sort of 21st century, is that we are constantly bombarded with with sort of things that will raise our stress levels. So we are online all the time. We're constantly connected. Social media is pinging things through to us. So what happens is that our body is constantly in fight or flight mode, and the relaxation response that the parasympathetic nervous system should bring isn't getting through, because our body's constantly working at this sort of hyper level. And then what happens is that the more the continuous stress that we are living within and our bodies are working within means that not only is the parasympathetic system not able to sort of break through and address the balance, but that every time a new stress situation happens, our body's responding even that much more quickly. So we're just left in this constant state of stress and alertness. Now, you may feel, well, I'm busy, my job's busy, my life's busy. That's okay, that gets me through, which of course it will do. The downside of that, though, is that when our bodies are flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, we don't relax. We can't relax. Our sleep quality and quantity, that's impacted. We may not eat properly. We're sort of eating on the run. We're certainly not digesting our food properly, because that digestive system has been sort of really dampened down. So we go to bed, we don't sleep properly, we get up, we're tired, we're irritable, and so the day starts again. So you can see that this cycle, this sort of vicious circle, keeps just keeps happening unless we can find a way of breaking that cycle. So in terms of what that does to you longer term, I've talked about the nerves in the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system sort of connecting every organ in our body. So having elevated stress hormones in our body all the time impacts the way those organs will function. And we can see that we get sort of in the medium and longer term increased blood pressure, insomnia, headaches, certainly our concentration and our memory is impacted. We have digestive issues, and we get acid reflux, stomach pains, nausea, diarrhea. We're irritable. Certainly at more extreme ends, we can end up with quite severe anxiety, depression, and in the much longer term, the build-up of these issues can lead to really serious heart issues, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and the list goes on. So being able to take steps to manage our stress, and to break that cycle, that sympathetic nervous system cycle, is so important. So let's look at what happens in terms of our behaviours under stress. So obviously we've talked about some of the the physical implications, and obviously those physical reactions will trigger different behaviours. Now, we all have very different stress triggers. What's stressful for me may not be stressful for you, and equally, our sort of the point that we become stressed is different for everybody. But certainly, under stress, our behaviours do change. We will show different behaviours when we are stressed, depending on sort of our inherent personality style. And I do believe that by understanding ourselves better, we can begin to predict and see the behaviours that we're demonstrating, and link that to, okay, I've been snappy, I've done this, I've done that. That must mean my levels of stress are higher than perhaps I'm appreciating. And when we are busy and running a million miles an hour, sometimes we don't stop and really recognise the level of stress that our bodies are working under. So one of the tools that I feel is really helpful in this area is insights discovery. So I don't know sort of how much you know about insights, but essentially it is it's a psychometric tool based upon the work of Carl Jung, so the sort of along similar vein to Myers-Briggs, and it's a profiling tool. You get when you complete the profiling tool, you get a sort of very detailed reports back, and that will really help you as an individual and others understand the behaviours that you demonstrate on a good day, but also what those behaviours shift to when you're working under pressure. So if I just give you, we haven't got obviously time in this session to go into huge depth about insights, and there's a lot that sits behind it, but so I'm going to share sort of really top level information here. But insights is based upon 4 key colour energies. So we have fiery red, sunshine yellow, earth green, and cool blue. So I'm just going to give some sort of typical top level behaviours that you'd expect to see for somebody who has sort of a preference for any of these particular colour energies. Actually, I should say before I launch into that we all have an element of all of these colour energies within our personality, and similar to things like Myers-Briggs, we tap into different colour energies depending on what we're doing. So for example, if we are working with data, we will tap into our cool blue energy to enable us to really examine some of the detail. If we are out with friends, we will tap into more of the sunshine yellow energy because we are looking to be sociable and to engage. So let's just go through each of the colour energies, and for me to just give you some typical behaviours. So for fiery red energy, you'd expect to see somebody who is quite competitive, very task focused. So sort of having a real sense of purpose. They will come across as quite strong-willed and wanting to get that task done. Be very determined to achieve. And be quite demanding of themselves and other people that they're working with. Sunshine yellow. So behaviours that you'd expect to see would be individuals who are very sociable, very engaging. They will be demonstrative, so quite maybe quite tactile with people they work with friends. Come across as very enthusiastic, very persuasive in the way that they engage and communicate with people. Earth green energy, so typical behaviors, you'd see someone who's very very caring, really good listener, very encouraging to those around, patient, relaxed, real source of support in a team environment. And then we have cool blue energy. So this energy is sort of quite data driven. They like detail. They will work in quite a precise and deliberate way. They like like processes. They'll be very questioning, so that's to get further information, further sort of depth of knowledge, and can come across as maybe sort of a little bit detached and quite formal. So we've got very different personality styles there. And as I mentioned earlier, we each, everyone has a little bit of all of these colour energies within us, but we have a preference. So we'll have a primary, a first preference colour energy, a second, a third, and a fourth. And we will tap into each of those colour energies, as I said, depending on the situation that we're in. Certainly no colour energy is better than any other, and we need all of them to to be effective in our jobs, but also in a team environment. You need all of those colour energies at play to bring sort of a good effective team working. So with these different styles, you could expect to see different behaviours under pressure and under stress. So what are the sources of stress for each of those different styles? So for red, fiery red energy, a loss of control is something that would definitely raise stress levels. So that might involve sort of them not being able to focus on something, or some things not moving as quickly as they would like, them being sort of slowed down in their achievement of a task, perhaps people working at a slower pace to what they do, or maybe people who maybe showing incompetence in terms of the way that they're approaching the job. So all of those things would raise stress levels for somebody with a preference or a lot of fiery red energy. For sunshine yellow energy, they enjoy that sort of sociability and interaction. So if you're in situations where they maybe working from home alone, they don't have the choice of how they engage. They're not involved as much. They don't have the choice of being involved. They lack influence. Maybe they're overlooked, or they're rejected from being part of a team, let's say. All of those things will raise stress levels for somebody with high levels of sunshine yellow energy. For earth green energy, they will find the lack of or loss of connection with others as something as a real source of stress. So that may also include where they perceive situations where there's a lack of consideration for team members and for others, maybe where things change very quickly, or where situations are quite volatile. All of those situations will raise stress levels. And then for cool blue energy, I mentioned about them being sort of very data driven. They like detail. So a lack of detail, lack of information, maybe things that aren't structured or logical, will cause stress, and that will, because that will give them a sense of almost a loss of competence. So you can see that different personality styles will have different things that will cause them stress. So what does that then translate into? So the behaviours that I talked about in that first wheel, so we would call those sort of good day behaviours, things that you'd expect to see when someone is working, effectively, and those behaviours will become sort of exaggerated when that individual is under stress. And we've looked at some of the sources of stress. So being able to recognise when we're in that state. So if we look at somebody with, let's say, a lot of fiery red energy, so they're competitive and they're demanding, they want results. If that individual then saw themselves as being maybe overly demanding, people reacting to them in quite a negative way, feeling that they're being pushed too hard, maybe there's a sort of an anger or an irritability coming through. That's the time when that individual can take a step back and think, hang on, I'm pushing people too hard. I'm not having the impact that actually I want to have here, and relate that to, okay, maybe my stress levels are higher than I'm really appreciating. Let me take a step back. Let's do something to bring some balance to to how I feel. So when we are under stress, as I say, our behaviours change, they become exaggerated. So fiery red energy, you may see someone being more aggressive, sort of being more irritable in the way they respond. With the sunshine yellow energy, that desire to being, to engage and to connect, maybe makes individuals overly responsive, or expressing their views in a way that maybe comes across as very opinionated or even argumentative. For earth green, maybe they become withdrawn, much more quiet, feeling resistant to some of the changes or the tasks that they're asked to do. And for cool blue energy, maybe that questioning style actually becoming sort of quite extreme, so overly questioning and almost nitpicking to the detail that's being presented to them, or maybe sort of that detached approach maybe is actually more aloof and more withdrawn. So both within ourselves, we can start to see some of those behaviours, but also our colleagues, particularly, Insights is a great tool to use in a team environment to raise awareness with colleagues about, okay, if you're seeing those sorts of behaviours, it could mean that someone's under stress, and maybe quite significant stress. It's a time for, maybe for you to flag with them as well, your concern about how they're feeling. Okay, so we've talked about sort of working under high levels of stress, both physically, what that means, and how that then translates into our behaviours. So what happens when we're under really extreme or sustained stress? So you'll hear the expression being beside yourself. That is something where that's a fairly common sort of expression where sort of you're in quite high levels of anger or excitement. And what happens when we're really at that sort of top level of extreme or sustained stress is that we move from our, so we have, let's use red energy, fiery red energy as an example. So we have our good day behaviours, we then have our more extreme behaviours under pressure, the exaggerated behaviours. there'll be a point when that really extreme sustained stress will tip, and the those behaviours will become exhausted, and that individual will sort of revert into their least preferred colour energy. Now let's just, as an example, let's say that is earth green. Just as an example, it's an opposite colour, and what you then see is somebody who would be reacting and have behaviours that are far more in line with earth green than fiery red. So you'd swap the maybe aggressive, demanding, agitated behaviours for someone who becomes withdrawn, may take things personally, may become, sort of very resistant to change. And what we also do and see is that when we do that, because we're using our least preferred color energy, it's least preferred for a reason, which is that we don't tap into, we can tap into it, but we don't tap into it very often. Maybe it's more uncomfortable. So we haven't developed it potentially to the same extent that we have our preferred color energies. So when we display those behaviors, we're potentially displaying them in quite an underdeveloped or immature way. So they can come across as, particularly difficult or surprising. And very often people will, they'll demonstrate these behaviors, and they may surprise themselves and certainly surprise colleagues with how they're behaving. And again, I think having that awareness of what behaviors you're showing can alert you to the fact that actually your stress levels are at quite an extreme place. There's a great book by a lady called Naomi Krank, really worth reading if you are interested in the personality profiling, Myers-Briggs insights. She's written a book called Beside Ourselves. There's been a sort of a later update to that called Was That Really Me? That really explores how we use this sort of underdeveloped part of our personality when we're under stress. So it's definitely worth a read. So we hopefully now have some awareness of how our behaviours can change and what they might look like, and that will enable us to hopefully put the brakes on and pull ourselves back a little bit and look for ways to actually get some balance into our system, which hopefully then reflects in our behaviours. So what can we do to start to address some of that stress balance? So I talked earlier about the vagus nerve. So I mentioned that is a large part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And the vagus nerve has many functions. It influences our breathing, our digestive function, our heart rate, and all of those things can have really big impact on our mental health. There's been a lot of research done, and if you stick vagus nerve into Google, a lot of these research papers will come up about actually toning or stimulating the vagus nerve so that it triggers that parasympathetic approach far more readily. And there are a number of activities that you can do which will stimulate, tone your vagus nerve. And I've got a couple of slides here which just list some of the activities that you can do. And what I really like about these is that they are things that do promote relaxation, but also are not necessarily going to take huge chunks of your time. One of the things that I certainly find, and people say to me, is that, look, when I'm really, really busy, and I'm really, really stressed, I don't have time to spend meditating for half an hour. Now, we should do that. We all know we should do that. But, the reality is that for some people, that may not happen. So what I want to do here is to give you some tips that will bring some balance sort of quite quickly. So deep and slow breathing, you will have heard about that. When we are under stress, our breathing becomes very shallow, our heart rate really sort of speeds up. And by being able to, slow our breath down so we can bring some calm to our body. Most people will breathe sort of 10 to 14 times each minute. And if we can slow that down to maybe having sort of 6 deep breaths that really, belly breathing, so we're really breathing deeply, expanding our stomach, and really then filling up our lungs, that will begin to really slow down our heart rate. So breathing deeply and slow, exhale, the exhalation should be long and slow. And this will begin to stimulate the vagus nerve. Cold exposure. So this is a really, really interesting one, particularly good at the moment because if we've got some snow and the weather's certainly pretty cold. But researchers have found that exposing yourself to some cold on a regular basis can lower that sympathetic fight or flight response and increase your parasympathetic activity. So things like cold showers, having a cold shower, that might seem a horrendous thought, but maybe at the end of your shower, gradually turning the temperature down so you can get it sort of reasonably cold, and standing there for minimum of 30 seconds, maybe trying to increase your time, or maybe going outside in cold temperatures, maybe without your coat, letting the cold onto your skin. You definitely increase your tolerance slowly. Don't sort of run and jump in a cold sea straight away. That would give your body sort of too big a shock. But increase your tolerance, but use that. And it's something that I do, and I find really, really effective actually. Another thing that you can do is run a bowl of cold water and just dip your face into that for a little bit. Come up for air, go back in, and again, I think that I certainly find that to be a very relaxing activity. Counterintuitive maybe, but I do find it relaxing. There's a great book actually by a Dutch athlete called Wim Hof. He's very much worth reading, and he also talks about cold exposure as well. So if that's something that that's interesting to you, then I'd really encourage you to get his book. Singing or humming. So the vagus nerve is connected sort of through your vocal cords and the muscles at the back of your throat. So singing and humming, or chanting, or some of you will know in meditation you can have the sort of the sound bowls. All of those sounds and the action of singing and humming can again provide stimulation for your vagus nerve, and can be relaxing. Meditation. So I touched on meditation a little bit earlier, in that people will very often say, look, meditation, I haven't got the time to do that. And I think also when people are really stressed and anxious, the act of sitting down and being quiet and calm and trying to keep your mind focused is that can be really difficult. When our bodies are going all the time, to just sit and find quiet time, again, feels like a step too far. But even if you can take a minute or 2 minutes and just sit calmly, that can help to really slow, slow your heart rate and slow your breathing down. Spending a minute in quiet, doing deep, slow breathing. There are some great apps out there. You'll be familiar with Headspace, with Calm. There's an app called Insight Timer, which again is very good. And as I say, just taking a minute to just sit quietly, just to regroup, can just bring that sort of that calm back a little bit, and restore a little bit of balance. So exercise, again, this is a well-known one. Going out for a run, that's not for everybody, but if you can get outside even for a few minutes, go for a short brisk walk, getting some fresh air, just increasing your heart rate a little bit, that will help. For those of you who've got kids at home, particularly homeschooling, you'll know that Joe Wicks does sessions each morning. He's got sessions that are really short, 10-minute sort of quick burst of activity. Again, it helps to burn off some of that adrenaline. Massage. So massage is a great one. Again, massage will help to stimulate the vagus nerve, and there are particular parts on the body, such as the feet, that by massaging the feet, again, that is very good for stimulating the vagus nerve. Obviously, in the current climate, we can't go out and pay for someone to do a massage for us. So even just massaging your shoulders yourself a little bit, sitting watching TV, just doing a bit of massage on your shoulders or your feet, all that will help to bring some calm to you. Diet is an interesting one, and I'm certainly not going to sort of sit here and give you lots of information about diet, but just a couple of things that I think are worth flagging. Sugar, we all, the sugar is the default sort of calm sort of thing when we're feeling stressed. Having some chocolate or some other sugary treat is always feels like a good thing. But what eating sugar does do, obviously, is it spikes our blood sugar. And when our blood sugar does spike, and if it's unstable, that can produce feelings that are very similar to stress. So just being mindful of that, and maybe cutting down on some of the sugar that you're eating during the day, can help how stressed that you're feeling. Caffeine, that's another one. Again, if you're drinking a few cups of coffee during the day, you're probably having too much caffeine, which can overstimulate the sympathetic nervous system and put stress on the body. So certainly if your stress levels are high or you're suffering from anxiety, it's worth trying to cut down on your coffee and moving maybe to some other drinks that are less caffeinated, green tea, or some of the herbal teas. Alcohol, this is the sort of third key one on diet that I'm going to mention. Again, it very often is that if you've had a stressful day, sitting down with a glass of wine or a gin and tonic, that can feel like a good end to the day. And I'm certainly not going to say to you don't do that, but just to flag that higher levels of alcohol can interfere with sleep. So what happens is that alcohol interferes with or it inhibits the parasympathetic nervous system, which then allows the sympathetic nervous system to dominate. So our sleep is impacted. We don't reach those deeper levels of sort of restorative sleep that we should have. So we'll wake up feeling less rested, maybe a bit headachy, a bit more sort of agitated. And so if we're then going into a stressful day, that doesn't set us up that well for coping with that. So absolutely a glass of wine is great at the end of the day, but just be aware that it can impact how, the quality of your sleep. And staying hydrated. So again, this is an interesting one. Again, there's been numerous studies showing that dehydration can have or lead to increased levels of stress, and that's basically because dehydration is very stressful on the body and can lead to higher levels of cortisol. So, through the day, just have plenty of water on your desk. Make sure you stay hydrated, and we've just talked about alcohol. Alcohol obviously does dehydrate you. So if you are having a glass of wine, have some water with it. Okay, so next steps. I can't highlight enough the importance of prioritizing your well-being. No one else is going to do that. The impact of stress is so significant, and I feel so strongly about helping people to manage their stress, because it can be so destructive. So prioritize yourself, plan the activities that you're going to do, and even if it's just, and as I say, on the slide, just focus on doing one or two of them. Don't overcommit. Don't give yourself extra things to stress about and to feel overwhelmed about, but commit to doing one or two of them, those stress balances each day, and really protect the time to do that. Make sure you do them. Insights, if you would like to have a profile done, please let me know. They are very helpful to really raise that level of self-awareness and to help you understand how your behaviours will change under pressure. I normally, I very often do insights, a profile and a coaching session, and I'm very happy to do that at a reduced rate for people on the webinar today. I also offer stress coaching programs, so if you would like to have some input to how you can manage stress and overwhelm, please let me know. But really do take steps to help yourself in managing your stress, because that will pay off for you and your health in both in the short and the long term. Okay, so I'm open to questions. We did have a question that came through before the webinar, which I'll just sort of go into first, if that's okay. So we were asked about stress risk assessments in the workplace, and the value, how much value we think these are, and suggestions around encouraging line managers to undertake these. So I do a lot of work with stress management with my clients, and the stress risk assessment, I think, is absolutely critical. I use the HSE risk assessment, and I think that certainly when stress is raised in the workplace, and I know that the person who raised the question made this comment herself, saying that managers will often feel defensive, and I think that's right. They do often feel defensive and do push back, and I think the great thing with the stress risk assessment is that it's a very objective tool, and really helps a discussion, to structure a discussion around stress, and to consider areas that I think probably the individual and the line manager might not have thought about, in terms of why stress levels for that individual are so high. So it really gives a good structure, and I think it's sort of providing, I suppose, some reassurance to the line manager that there are stress. There's many dimensions to stress and what may be causing it. So being able to have that very objective discussion and structured discussion is helpful. and I've certainly found that you can put in place things to help an individual with their stress that actually, aren't hugely burdensome to the organisation or the line manager, and can make a big difference. So I think they are really important, and I think will give line managers confidence to to deal with issues and deal with them compassionately, but objectively as well.
Yeah, it was actually me that raised that one because I've got experience of it. I think it's maybe just HR directors that don't like to do them. Everybody else seems to find them quite valuable. That's my experience anyway. Because I did in one of a manager had taken for a new team and people were saying they were all stressed and all the rest of it, a kind of operational team. And he said that he thought everybody in the team should have a stress risk assessment, which I did think at the beginning was a bit OTT, but I did them all with him. And after doing them, 80% of the issues were either kind of gone or we really the responsibility of the individual. Simple things like locking their phone in their drawer when they weren't on call because they were obsessed to check their messages, and so they decided themselves that was a stressor, and so in the end we ended up with very little that some of them were company goals, yes, they were organisational, some of them they couldn't do short term, but about 80% of the issues became either that managed or much greatly reduced, and we kept records and people did them. So actually having done that, we found it quite easy to manage because the people, when you were with them, were quite open. They didn't kind of say it was the manager's fault. They kind of just opened up and had a good conversation. Maybe that's because it was a new manager coming in and they were kind of a bit more hopeful, but I've found the opposite actually with HR people, funnily enough. They don't want to know. They want to know about them for their own team, but they're okay for everybody else.
Yeah, gosh, and I think HR teams need them probably more than most at the moment, don't they?
Yeah. I don't think people realise they're actually your legal mitigation tool, because even if you've just done it, not even done it that well, it's better than not doing it at all, as long as you have a plan and you kind of review it from time to time. And that we found actually that the employees owned most of the issues. They just wanted to talk to somebody for an hour because they hadn't had that before. So actually, having done a load in a new team, I thought it was really quite good, although it took a bit of time. They were like lining up at the door. Everybody wanted to speak, but they really just wanted to speak rather than the company to own the problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've always had, I have to say, very positive experiences with using them, just as you've talked about. And because I think it does, it shows the individual that you're obviously that you're sitting, you're listening, and you're caring for their well-being. But I think it also, because it's a very well structured, the HSE one anyway, very well structured form, covers all aspects of sort of the way that their working life is constructed. People then suddenly think about things that perhaps they weren't aware of, and you can really hone in on what the issue is, rather than it's just an all-encompassing I'm stressed. So you begin to sort of compartmentalize where the issues are and where the issues aren't. And I think it's a good benchmark as well. I mean, obviously the legal mitigation is absolutely critical, but it provides that line in the sand in terms of, okay, where are we now? What can we do? Revisiting it in a month's time, let's say, has that helped? Where are you now? What progress have we made? Do we need to prioritize something else? So I'm a real advocate of them, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I just thought I'd raise that because I think people think as soon as they raise that, that's some kind of flag. Yeah, well, it is. It's a flag. You should be doing something about it, even if it's just having the conversation. Because in another organisation, we had a chap who, for years and years, his absence pattern was horrendous. He had quite severe depression. He definitely had a genuine condition, but it was beyond the company's ability to adjust the role to the point that he'd be able to attend for work. But nobody did one of these. And when we actually started following a process, it became clear that it didn't matter what we did. This chap had such severe issues that he would never be able to fulfill really his contract. And we went through a process, and he ended up, he was going to get called and he would have been dismissed. However, he resigned before that, and there wasn't any claim or anything, because we'd said, well, here's all the stuff, we tried as much as possible, but it's just not possible. He has a really severe condition, and that's another issue. And actually, I know it's horrible because he left, but he was going to be dismissed and he ended up resigning, so it was less stress for us because we were going to have to dismiss him. But they had failed before over the years to do it, so he kind of used every angle to say, well, you haven't done it properly, and as a result, there was always too much risk. We went, well, we have now, so where do we go? So actually, even if you're just quite hard-nosed and commercial and don't care, it's still worth doing.
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, I'm with you 100% on that. But it does, using that formal, something similar. It keeps the discussion, very constructive, very focused. So I think, and I do think that gives line managers some confidence in managing stress situations where they may feel, what's going to come up? Am I going to be out of my depth with it? So, yeah, no, thank you for that. No, that was a really, really good question.
But building on the comment that Angela made about HR not doing it, risk assessments, and I sort of, it reminded me of the core behaviours, and I just got out the valuing people new core behaviour, and actually one of the areas is about well-being. So there is an expectation that HR professionals demonstrate it at chartered member level. You will promote the business and people benefits of well-being and integrate into your work. And at chartered fellow level, you will engage organisations in creating a healthy work culture that enables well-being. So, in terms of what we're meant to do, and I'm absolutely with you, Angela, in terms of sometimes HR are the worst at HR.
There's no doubt in my mind that don't put HR in charge of anything for HR. Take somebody else. If you've got a reorganisation or health and wellbeing, gets anybody but the HR director's team, because every reorganisation I've ever been through in my life, the worst has been run by the HR director without failure. So I'm not really surprised.
No, and I think what we don't recognize sometimes is HR, we are there as obviously there's the commercial aspect, but we are there to support the organization, and I think particularly over the last period of time, HR people have taken on a huge amount of stress in terms of supporting other people with their stress. And I think if you're a counsellor, you have supervision, you have somebody you can talk to about your issues, who can give you guidance and support. But in HR, we don't have that, and yet very often we are taking a counselling type role and taking on everyone else's stress. So it is really important to find a way of actually managing our own stress.
Yeah, ideally be role models, but as Angela says, what is it? The cobbler's children and their shoes, and comes to mind.
I don't know. I think there needs to be. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit like lawyers. I know some lawyers, and they say, "Don't come and look at our employment contracts," and they're absolutely appalling. But, and we're very difficult. Don't ever raise a grievance in a law firm either, because I think it's maybe to do with that kind of thing that, and I know some like GPs and stuff and doctors, people say they're not very empathetic and all the rest, so maybe it's something to do, but it's just quite interesting. I think HR people are supposed to maybe just not really follow the policies that are there for everybody else. Maybe there's a secret wee cupboard for the HR people that I've never discovered. That may be why I'm going wrong.
No, very, very, very true.
I sent you a note. I don't know if you saw the chat. I had one done about a couple of years ago, but I had it done before the Insights one. So I'm really high red, really high yellow, quite low blue, and almost non-existent in green.
Okay.
So having worked in a team where everybody else was blue or green, it was very, very quite noticeable to notice the I used to think that, I remember starting in one role, the first week, the silence was deafening. And I thought, I don't think I can cope in this environment when no one talks in an open plan office, and an open plan office that was away from everybody else. And I said to the colleague that was sitting beside me, who also was silent but seemed a bit more personable, and I said, I'm a bit worried that nobody's talking. I'm used to talking. He said, don't worry, we have a lunch every Friday on payday, and that's when you can talk. And he said it was my idea in the suggestion card, because we were not really, the manager doesn't like us chatting. She's quite, introvert and likes quietness. So I came up with this really good idea that every payday we go out for an hour, and that's when you can do your talking. I'm absolutely not making that. I'm not making that up. But eventually, even that hour stopped. So you can imagine what the atmosphere was like then. I honestly not making that up. That was an example of you got your talking time. Once you've done it, that's it. Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember running an insights training session, and the team were primarily either fiery red or sunshine yellow, and there was one individual who was his preference was cool blue energy, and when they discovered he was cool blue energy, the team were really surprised, and they said, "Oh, you're really sociable," and we were really surprised at that, and sort of the characteristics of cool blue energy don't fit with the way we see you. And he said, "Well, I plan my spontaneity," and they thought that was absolutely hysterical, but that was exactly, he said, I plan that between 9 and 9:30 I will be spontaneous, I will come and talk to people. But yeah, it's but it's great. It was a level of self-awareness that he had even before his profile being done. So brilliant. Any other questions?
No, I just think it's a shame there's not more on the session. It was a really excellent session. I don't know. I think, though, there's a bit of this. People are calling it this Zoom fatigue, because I help with the CIPD West of Scotland. We're doing events and stuff, and we found that we did have loads at the beginning. I think people are just, maybe particularly with this latest lockdown, maybe people are they've just burnt out or something. I don't know, but I know that there's kind of less. And I'm probably not going in as many at the beginning. I think I should go loads, but people still need to have some kind of contact. Maybe people are just too busy doing other things, but it's a shame that there's not a bit more interest, because it's probably not, for Krista's point, it's probably not worth you doing these for just like today. It's one person. It's great for me, but it's probably not great use of your time if nobody's, I don't know. Krista, were they booking on, or are they just not turning up, or are they not booking on?
We had quite a few booked actually, but it's the usual thing that people do book and then things happen. So I mean, to be honest, I know we've discussed it with Lisa, and my view is, and we agreed that really it's a great opportunity to get out there and also to practice. It's always useful. So certainly in terms of time use, it's one of those things I'm always glad I do them. I mean, I'm really glad, and I hope Lisa is, that she's done this today, because I've learned new things, lots of new things about presentations, and also about I've made a little note about my doing a little bit of some good practice here, and I think it's just so easy to like Joe Wicks. I don't know if you heard the story of Joe Wicks, but apparently before Zoom happened and lockdown happened, apparently he had very few people sort of interested, but he kept going and kept going and kept going. And then eventually, and obviously with COVID and the lockdown, it really was the sort of the springboard he required, but he was already, he was doing it. So I think it's one of those that it will take time to develop this, but I'm really passionate about running them, and you're here, and we are I'm deliberately positioning them as smaller, interactive, so that it's not a Zoom with lots of people, because that I think it's a bit different, and it adds value to individuals. So
no, and I think it's nice to have the discussion as well. I think people get as much from that discussion and sharing experiences as just sitting, watching a few slides and then dropping off again. So I mean, I'm really glad it was helpful. I do, as I said in the session, I do feel really, really passionately about helping people, because I know how it's impacted me in the past, and still does. And there are still times that I need to take a step back and go, right, come on, let's focus, let's get some calm. But so many people, I think particularly women, are so overwhelmed at the moment, juggling so much, don't stop, don't sleep, self-medicating with wine and gin and tonic, and you just think, oh gosh, it's at some point it's all going to come crashing down. So it's something I feel really, really strongly about supporting people with. So I'm glad there were some things that you could take out of it, because I think, again, stress, people see a stress management webinar and think, oh, am I going to hear the same stuff over and over again? So I wanted to try and make it a little bit different. So I hope, I say,
I think it's probably a bit different where people aren't working maybe physically, in terms of whether virtually it changes, because obviously if you're working physically with a team, and you can see the different types of personalities and insight, and that you kind of know that noise and chatting and polarity and that really annoys some people in the team, whereas you maybe don't get that as much when you're just having a video conference or a call with somebody. Or a manager I think a manager can be managed a bit better maybe remotely, because you can just not take their call, or you can just not be there or something. Whereas if manager's constantly up at your desk, but I suppose it might be like, I like contact with people and talking stuff, but I've got used to just talking to myself now, really, for a lot of the time. But I don't mind sort of now, I suppose. I don't really have a lot of contact with people compared to what I used to do. In the beginning, that was quite stressful, but I think you kind of adapt to it, and it becomes, you think, oh, maybe I don't need to be around as many people, and you think things. So some of it, I suppose maybe some of your stressors might change because of lockdown as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, actually. I mean, I certainly, when I first started working for myself and spent more time, just working alone, I found that quite stressful. But I have adapted to that. But I was saying to Krista earlier on, I think the fact that your whole life is now in one place. You can't separate out aspects of your life as easily. If work was stressful and home was good, you'd leave work behind, you'd come home, you'd have that space where you could relax and detach from that stress, and now everything's in one sort of melting pot, isn't it? And it's just far more difficult to switch off from the sources of stress. And you turn on your social media and there's stuff about COVID, and you turn on the news and there's you're just bombarded with stuff that raises your stress levels all the time. So
I know who'd think that Donald Trump would actually be a relief from COVID, because that I'm like following that. Even my mum was able to. I couldn't believe my mum. She's 77, and sometimes I don't think she's zoned in. And she went, "Yes, they had those Confederate flags and all this," and I'm like, "Gosh, my mum was following this." She goes, "Oh, well, it's all rubbish. The rest of it's rubbish." And even though it's terrible what they're doing in America, I actually find I was hooked to that, because it didn't actually mention COVID during it.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, I haven't this week. I've listened more to the news just because of the situation evolving so much. But certainly for a good few months before this week, I've just not listened to the news. I've just found it too much, and just my own sanity. I thought I just need to detach from it. So I'll let the news happen, and then I might just quickly read the headlines. But that will be it. And yeah, difficult times.
So, thank you very much. Then that was really, really useful.
Oh, good, and I'm really pleased you found it useful. I think we're connected on LinkedIn, Angela. I'm sure we are. So you'll have my contact details if you wanted to another insights report done or what have you. But yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for coming along, and again, thank you, Krista, for giving me the opportunity to be part of your series. It's much appreciated.
Yeah. Lovely. Okay. Well, I'm just thinking about. I actually did design and delivered all the 8 core behaviours last year, this year. Where's this year gone? Last year. And passion for learning was the last one I did, and which is a core behaviour, you may or may not know. And I actually, when I introduced it, I said, this is probably the easiest behaviour because it's about learning. And so you don't need to know about how to decision make or have to know about managing data. But on some levels it's the easiest, but on other levels it's the hardest, because invariably we don't develop ourselves. We think, oh, well, we'll do that CPD next week or the week after. Mm-hmm. And linking again to Angela's comment about people coming today, I don't think HR are very good at prioritising their CPD, their learning, their development. So I think it's a bit of that as well, and we actually do have it as a behaviour, which says something, doesn't it, that we're expected to have this passion for learning. So it is expected of us. And
well, yeah, I mean, it's an example. I've always been quite good at CPD because I just like it. I'm not saying I'm any better than anyone else, but I kind of can, I'm definitely meeting CPD. And I worked in one team, and the person sat beside me said, I can't believe that you spend time on that. You should be spending time on your work. I don't have time for CPD because I focus on being productive. And I just thought, well, first of all, probably most of my CPD is done technically in my own time, but there was almost a resentment. If you are doing it, then you must be missing something else. But it isn't actually about the time. You don't have to spend, it's just sometimes just having the interest in it, I think HR people are really bad at walking the talk in terms of what CPD is, and it's not. I mean, I very rarely now go on any kind of course or anything, and even it's different things. But I think HR it's that other thing that everyone else. HR tells everyone else to do, but we're not supposed to do it ourselves. And if you are, really keep quiet about it, because someone you'll really annoy somebody.
No. But I think it's interesting as well, that person said you're not being productive if you do CPD, and you think, okay, does not CPD make me more productive?
No, but it was just because they didn't really see it as important and or any issue. They were very critical. It was just, again, I think it was just a team that, not criticising the greens and the blues, but it was a team of greens and blues, and it was like, I think there was no positive benefits to them in doing CPD. So that was just it, but it didn't put me off. That's the good thing.
I think it's. I mean, to be honest, I think it's crazy because when I go on new things and learn new things, what do they say? Growth and learning is outside your comfort zone. So if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got. So, and HR is supposed to be forward thinking. It should be forward thinking because it's got to be knowing what's going to happen. What are the trends? So unless you go out there and find that out, you're not going to do that. But I'm speaking to the converted, aren't I, ladies?
No.
Well, I was a friend recently. She got a big job practically in HR director, and she went, look, one of the things they've asked me to talk about is AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know anything. Could you send me in? So I'm like, yeah, here's the CIPD paper. Yeah. Here's here's this. I said, here's what I think they might ask. And she went, oh my God, that's great. And I'm like, you're going for like an 80 grand, 90 grand job, and you can't talk off the cuff just about the latest trends. There's got to be something I'm missing here, because she got that job.
Yeah. Maybe says something about the recruitment and selection procedures most organisations have.
Yeah, I actually felt, not that I would, but I felt, you know what, I've done, but then it was quite easy for me to give her. It didn't take much time for me, and she was really grateful, whereas I was thinking, why don't you know this? But the fact that she was very grateful for it made up for the fact that I thought she should have already known it,
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right.
Well, thank you to you both. It's been really
Right.
nice chatting to you
Yes.
as well.
Okay.
See you again.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Angela. Bye.
Bye.